Hello, everyone. This is Niroshan Madampitike, a passionate agilist as well as an international keynote speaker. Today, I'm gonna talk to a very special guest that you probably know, a guest that has done a lot of work to the agile community, disrupting the traditional thinking, helping the agile community to innovate and work around these innovative ideas to make better teams within the organizations. And Jurgen Appelo. Now, if I just talk about him a bit, he's an author, speaker, as well as a founder of quite a few innovations. Jurgen is helping creative organizations survive as well as thrive in the 21st century. He also offers concrete games, tools, and practices so that you can introduce better management with a fewer managers. He also introduced or launched Unfix model very recently. This is with the intention of creating versatile organizations focusing on continuous innovation and better human experience. So, how could this particular podcast help you? Is a question. Well, if you're someone who has been practicing agile, someone wants trying to go into a bit of scaled level of agile practices, someone who feels like you are being stuck in quite a few traps, this podcast is for you. So, without further ado, let me welcome our guest for the day. Hi, Jugan.
Hey, hello, Nero. Nice of you to invite me.
My privilege to have you on this particular show, Jurgen. In fact, I've been planning this talk for a few years, and I thought, why not I shout out to you and invite. Thank you for accepting the invite.
I'm glad to be here.
In 5 words, how could you describe yourself?
In only 5 words.
Yes,
Well, I often call myself a creative networker. That's two.
right. Okay,
And I'm a public speaker. That would be four.
nice.
An author of books. That would be 5 words. So I balance a couple of things in my business life. I'm an entrepreneur, as you indicated. I have been involved in the startup of a couple of new businesses, some successful, some not. That is part
Mhm.
of being an entrepreneur, and that's what I love doing: creating new stuff and see what works or not. I am not a coach or consultant. I it seems that this requires explaining every now and then, because some people expect me to go into organizations and help them with their agile transformation. I don't do
Right.
that. There are others who are much better than I am, who are happy to provide such services. I am most interested in my own problems, as I always say. And yeah, so figuring out how to create my own business with my own teams. That's what I love.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that explanation. According to you, why should every organization be agile? Well, first place, should every organization be agile? If so,
Mm,
why?
I think no, because survival is not mandatory. I think it is about surviving and thriving in an ecosystem that is changing faster and faster in the 21st century. There are so many things nowadays happening, political
Mhm.
crises, look at COVID and energy crisis, and on it goes. And at the same time, innovative developments such as AI, machine learning, blockchain, biotech, you name it. The world is increasingly unpredictable. If you want to survive in that environment, and this is completely optional, then it makes sense to be more agile, more versatile in how you are organized on the inside, because that means you can respond more rapidly to risks and opportunities outside of the organization. So the responsiveness of the company. That is what it's about. But hey, in some parts of the world, in some industries, it is not a big thing yet. And so there may not be a need now to be more agile, but all the signs show that this is a thing that affects every business ultimately down the road. Some industries have just been affected earlier than others with the increased pace of change. So I think it is inevitable, but I'm also a big fan of creative destruction. I'm not interested in saving companies that refuse to change. Fine, let them die, and other companies will emerge that do a better job. That's my opinion.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah, so it's the same stance I would have, right? So although we tend to think that agile is for everyone, well, if you understand the reasons, if you know your why, I mean, go for it. Otherwise, it's not for you, right? So as I think consultants and agilists, trying to kind of promote it up to a level, it's a great perspective, and thank you for that.
Yeah, and to be fair, what I talk about, other people refer to as agility, business agility, which sometimes is not the same thing as agile, because some people refer to agile as being the original Agile manifesto with its values and principles and everything. And then yes, you could say to some extent some of the ideas there are outdated now,
Hmm.
because hey, that was 20 plus years ago. Of course, we evolve and things are different now. So I'm talking about business agility in a broader sense.
Yeah, so I understand. Yes, even in my experience, you can whenever I started working in at least few companies, right? I have never spoke the term agile, right?
Yeah.
But you could be agile without being. That's where the business priorities, the business approach becomes a priority. Right? Then you really don't need to pronounce the term, right?
Yeah.
Saying, hey, we are going back to agile, what is being described in the manifesto, etc., right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. Based on your experience, Yugan, what are the top two blockers that you have observed for companies to be agile?
Hmm. Well, up off the top of my head, I would say one is middle management, or some people would refer to it as extended hierarchies, where there's a lot of waste happening in the middle part of the hierarchical organization. That for sure is a blocker. I have been very inspired by networked organizations such as Hire, the Chinese company that I visited 10 plus years ago. There are several books on them and lots of articles. They're sometimes called the most creatively managed company in the world by Gary Hamel, for example. And they're organized as a network, not as a hierarchy. Literally, the CEO fired all the middle managers 10 years ago and told them either you become the CEO of a micro enterprise within the network or find yourself another kind of job. But we have no use for big, fat middle management layers anymore. So I think that is one obstacle where middle managers have territories, try to protect their ways of working and need something to do. The other obstacle might be the mindset of copy pasting blueprints of how others are organized elsewhere. You see that in the way frameworks are presented in the agile community. I see them as blueprints full of good patterns and practices. The individual patterns can be borrowed elsewhere, but the entire blueprint, you cannot copy it. It doesn't work like that. But this is a way this is sometimes approached in the world at large, where the blueprints are being sold, and the certification is about how well do you understand the blueprint, the framework. I don't think that adds a lot of value. I have an ambivalent feeling about methods and frameworks. I love them because they capture good ideas that work elsewhere, but they collect them in such a way that the combination is offered as a rigid structure, and I don't believe it works like that. I think every city is different. I often use the analogy of cities. You cannot just take the blueprint of New York and apply it to London. Doesn't work. But the patterns are the same. New York has town squares and promenades, and city parks. Well, London also has town squares and promenades and city parks, just in a different configuration. That is the level at which I believe the thinking needs to be. We need to learn from each other by copying and modifying patterns, and leave the frameworks and blueprints for what they are, as case studies. The frameworks are case studies of what worked at a company elsewhere, but don't copy the blueprint. That doesn't work.
Super perspective. Love the 2 pointers that you just mentioned. Do you feel like leadership support is not so great in general, or is it contextual?
Well, I hear good and bad stories. To be honest, I do not have statistics about how many organizations have good leadership versus how many have bad leadership. Look at great examples such as Semco and Hire and others, where the executives totally get it. The senior management is completely on board, and there are books such as Frederic Laloux's Reinventing Organization, full of these examples. My friends at Corporate Rebels also have great overviews of companies doing a great thing. But as I said, I don't know the statistic. It could be that these are exceptions.
Right.
It could be indeed that most organizations are not like that, and that leadership is in general an obstacle, and not an enabler for change. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. And the next question is connected with what we are discussing now. I've been following up your innovation quite a few years, and I saw that you launched versatile organizations. Was it the beginning of this year?
The unfixed model for versatile organizations. Yes. Well, I published the prototype in autumn last year to see
Right.
what the response would be. The response was overwhelmingly positive. So I thought, okay, let's continue with this experiment. And yes, I launched the website exactly on January 1st this year,
Right.
because I worked on it during the Christmas holidays
Okay.
to prepare for New Year's Eve launch. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so let me ask you the question with regard to that, Jürgen. Uh, so, talking about versatile organizations, can you just tell us what exactly it is? What are you trying to accomplish through that approach?
Right. So I have experimented with different messages and explanations just to see what sticks, what people find easily understandable. And I think I have now, for now, settled on helping organizations scale down and scale out. Scale is still an important topic in the Agile community for good reasons. We want to know how business agility applies at larger scale, because the Agile Manifesto, as it is originally written, does not scale, and that was never it was never intended to. It relies on trust, for example. Well, you can trust 100 people. You cannot just trust 80,000 people. The human brain is not equipped to handle such large numbers of people to trust. So the manifesto as written does not scale, but still the values and principles are valid and should be valid at larger scale. We need to figure out how to make larger companies and enterprises work in a more agile way. So I now explain that as scaling down and scaling out, removing the removing the hierarchy and turning that into a network, horizontal instead of vertical. And a lot of that is about organizational structure. How do teams work together? We know how agile teams work. We know the concept of Scrum teams or Kanban teams or feature teams, whatever you want to call them, stream aligned teams. I call them value stream crews. Done that, but an enterprise is more than 15,000 Scrum teams. You need a few more suggestions in terms of what patterns to apply to make those 15,000 Scrum teams work together collaboratively, where not everyone knows each other. And for that, I have started the Unfix model, collecting patterns from different sources. None of them are my own, actually. I just borrowed and credited other people for having great ideas. And the sources are on the website. And a starting point is team topologies, for example. Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pais did a very, very good thing identifying 4 patterns for agile teams, teams in agile organization. But I go beyond those 4. I offer more because I want to offer something that the entire organization can use, not just the IT part, not just software development, but anyone in a larger enterprise, from IT to human resources and from finance to operations. And that's an ongoing experiment, actually.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds great. Now, again, a follow-up question on the same, Jürgen. Now, uh, just want to ask you, have you come across a book called Traction?
Yes, I think I read it actually. Yeah.
Right. So, based on Traction, they introduce EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, right?
Mm.
Uh, in that, they kind of talk about 5 pillars or 5 elements that every small organization should focus on, right? They start with the strategy, then talk about people, then talk about issues, then talk about what else? Process, right? As they also pay, I think they are hugely inspired by OKR, right?
Mhm.
They use the concept called ROCks. So similarly, you can, so if you are to kind of tell us, okay, this is exactly how unfixed model works, do you recommend certain pillars that organizations should start focusing on?
Well, to be honest, I think there are lots of different ways you can slice the things that are important for organizations. And I do not remember exactly the pillars of traction. There are other books out there like Exponential Organizations that have their own pillars and principles and values. Everyone has their own perspectives on how to slice what is
True.
important. What I have done basically as a starting point, I used organization design because I thought
Yeah.
this was badly addressed by the current approaches in the agile community. We see the scaled agile framework and large scale scrum. Spotify model is sometimes used as a framework, and then there are the wacky ones such as holacracy and others. They all have some suggestions, but all of them are far from complete and comprehensive when it comes to organization design, like how to draw the organization of where do people work with each other and how does everything connect. So I
Yeah.
thought let's use that as a starting point. Let's focus on structure first. I know that is just a subset. You also need process. You also need performance and whatnot. And we'll get there. I'm pretty sure. But it's good to have a beachhead, as they say in the startup scene, a beachhead market, something where you can be the best. And I wanted the unfixed model to have as a starting point to be the best choice in terms of
Right.
organization design. Let's do that properly first, and we may get to the other stuff later on. So I fully acknowledge that this is not comprehensive. I do not address how to do retrospectives, for example. I do not address the options you have for planning. There's
Right.
so much on this topic already in the Agile community. I have nothing new to offer there.
Right.
So please feel free to go to other sources. But I think no other source is as comprehensive as I am now trying to be with the unfixed model when it comes to organizational structure. So
Right.
that's a starting point for me.
Superb, superb. Love to hear that. Yeah, so I kind of started following up on that. I even enroll for the group, but I'm yet to follow up and kind of pick up progress on that.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
yeah, so I'll definitely follow up on that because I also felt like this kind of the way you have kind of broken down the complex organizational perspective into smaller parts was really nice, and I thought of why not I go through it.
Yeah,
uh,
and to be honest, if you ask in any organization, can you draw the organizational structure? What people usually do is they will draw the typical
Work chart.
vertical org chart, right? That's the way of thinking that management and HR now has. I have seen that
Mm,
plenty of times. That is the language in
mm,
which people talk, and I would like to offer something else.
right.
A good reason some people say this is it's a pattern language. You're offering people another language to describe how the organization is structured instead
Right.
of drawing the typical line management org chart. It would be better if they draw teams, like which
Yeah.
people work together as teams and in which bases do they come together and how does that scale out instead of up. That is a different kind of thinking because it's a different language that you use, and hopefully that sends people in another direction.
Super. Super. This is the Agile Wisdom Podcast. Sometime back, I gave up on the org chart because in any organization I have been part of, the organization chart never worked. But we fall back to that, right? Every
Right.
organization says, this is our org chart. Probably it's just one
Useless.
time it's shown. We never return to that, right? But
Right.
we tend to kind of keep trusting and saying to everyone
Yeah.
that hey, we have an org chart, right? That is never used. In your unfixed model, do you talk about accountabilities and putting the right person in the right seat is kind of a priority in your thinking,
Mhm.
or what's your thinking around it?
Well, not exactly. Look, every I suggest that the organization is divided into bases. The base is a sense of give people a sense of belonging.
Right.
You cannot feel a sense of belonging to 4,000 people. That's too much. The
Mhm.
human mind cannot handle so many
Yeah.
people. So you don't feel psychological safety among such a big number. So that scales up to maybe 100, 150, but the actual examples I have seen out there is often smaller. It is
Right.
maybe 20, 30-ish people. That's a good size for a base. And that base will then have management, the governance crew. They are responsible, they are accountable for everything that happens
Right.
in the unit. It is because that's the traditional management, and they will report up to the executive team or whatever it is, the shareholders, that are ultimately owners of the company. So they are the first point of accountability. Now, of course, hopefully they delegate as much as possible to the various self-organizing teams that you have within such a base. For example, there could be multiple, or there should be multiple value stream crews who offer value to customers, and then they are held accountable by the governance crew, by management, for the value that they offer to customers. And then there could be a platform crew that offers services to those other teams, infrastructure or whatever. And then they are held accountable for the quality and of the services that they offer. So no matter how many teams or crews, as I often call them, you create within the base, accountability ultimately is with management, but they should get rid of as much as possible by delegating. That's what I have always said with Management 3.0. That's why delegation poker exists, and delegation levels. You push as much as possible to the various teams, and then they are accountable for what they do. And I love the idea. It fits with what, for example, the likes of Richard Branson say, who say, care about your people, and then they care about your customers. That is completely in line with what I suggest with the unfixed model. The managers should care about their people, delegate, and hold them accountable so that they can take care of customers. So they provide the value there. That's not something that management does themselves directly. So there's accountability all over the place, but it is up to management to decide what to delegate and to whom. You can even delegate compensation. You can delegate performance reviews. You can delegate personal development. Ultimately, management could be doing very, very little in a base in such a unit. But even for legal reasons, ultimately there needs to be someone who reports officially to the shareholders. So even for that reason, you will have a governance person where accountability sort of comes together.
I'm glad I asked that question. It created quite a lot of clarity around the accountability and how it should be kind of tackled within an organization. There are two questions on the same from our
Yeah.
audience. Ratash is asking, for typical large organizations seeking to experiment with unfixed, what do you believe to be the adjacent possible next step?
Right. Well, I love the fact that Charlie uses adjacent possible, which is a great term from systems thinking and
Right.
complexity thinking. So yeah, what I have found to be working quite well is to do nothing and just draw what the organization looks like now. So
Mhm.
instead of drawing the traditional org chart, use the unfixed patterns, the base, the value stream crew, the facilitation crew, capability crew, and so on, and just see how far you get by drawing what is happening now. You will be surprised. I'm sure there are already some patterns that you see you have adopted. If you have an agile team, ta-da, you have a value stream crew. If you have
Mhm.
a couple of coaches helping others, then apparently you have a facilitation crew. So I think that's a good starting point, because you don't change anything, you don't touch anything, but you just switch to another language, another way of talking. And it gives people maybe a sense of confidence, like, we're already doing something. We have already started actually with some of the patterns. We are further than ground zero.
Right.
And once you have done that, you will probably see that some things are not really working well, or some things you cannot draw. Like, you cannot draw a matrix organization with the unfixed model. That is intentional, because I think you should switch from matrix to network.
Right.
So that is a breaking point. and there will be more things that are probably you cannot draw. Okay, good. That gives you a couple of points of concern, so you
Right.
can list them. And then the next thing I suggest is drawing some potential futures. There are systems thinkers like Russell Ackoff, who was famous for idealized design. This suggests to create some possible futures. Imagine that you have nothing now. What would you like to the organization to be if you could draw anything? And then maybe use that with scenario planning, so you have 2, 3, or 4 possible futures, so you know what you have now, what possible futures there are, and then probably you see some commonalities among those possible futures. Well, that would be a good next step. If each potential future says it would be nice to have a platform crew, then maybe that is the first thing to start with, because that keeps all the options open, and it gives you the next adjacent step, while not scratching out any of the potential directions that the organization could evolve into. So draw first what you have, draw some potential futures, and figure out what is a good next small step that doesn't hurt anyone, and that keeps all the options open. And then if you do that repeatedly, the organization will evolve. That being said, you will probably arrive at a point where you cannot do Kaizen anymore. Those individual step by step improvements will get you to a local optimum, but then at least you have learned what the landscape looks like. You have experience, and then you know better what a better position elsewhere would be. But that probably requires you to do a radical change. Kaikaku, they call that in lean terminology. And that is
Right.
what they did at, for example, the Chinese company Hire. They did have experience with small change, incremental change. But then at some point, the CEO said, now I want a radical change, because we have just been meddling and getting some local experience, but the true change requires a radical reinvention of ourselves. Though that was Kaikaku, that was firing 10,000 middle managers. But you do
Right.
that with experience, knowing what you're doing and knowing what the landscape looks like.
Excellent. Excellent. One more quick question from Rui on the same Yuga. So let me display that here. Is it fair to say that unfix is value driven?
Absolutely. So the question is, value to whom? For the value stream crews, of course, the value is to the customers. Those are agile teams with end-to-end responsibility of a value stream. But that is not the only pattern. You might also have platform crews. For them, the value is offered to the other employees. That is what an infrastructure team or a service team should be doing. They should be seeing the others in the base as their clients, because they
Hmm.
use their services. So for them, the value is up to the other employees. And then there are others. Facilitation crew also offers value to the value stream crews. That's the whole point of coaching and mentoring and so on.
Hmm.
And for the governance crew, they offer value to the shareholders, first of all, because they're accountable to the business owners, but also to everyone inside, because they need to make sure that the entire employee experience is a great one, because otherwise people are going to quit their job. As Richard Branson said, care about your people, and then they care about the customers. So for the governance crew, the value is provided to everyone in the base and the shareholders or whoever owns the organization. So every pattern is there to offer value to someone, but the stakeholders could be different depending on who you're talking about.
Moving on to the core of the talk, because we themed the talk podcast as avoiding scaling traps. So let's
Hmm.
talk about the traps that you have observed. So let's look at the number one trap according to your experience, Jurgen. So based on what you have seen in the community, right, be it tech or non-tech companies, whenever a particular company is trying to adopt or transition into agile ways of working, right? What is the top trap that you have seen in the companies? Where are they getting stuck?
Well, I think it is applying frameworks or blueprints of things that work elsewhere, but that you cannot simply copy to other organizations. And specifically, is if when this involves certification and so on, you give people a feeling that they know what they're doing, but they're just learning how things worked elsewhere. Doesn't mean that's going to work at this particular organization that you're trying to transform, because every company is different. Every
Hmm.
city is different. You can copy individual patterns and practices, not the entire blueprint or map of another city.
Hmm.
That makes no sense. And I think that is the trap that executives and other managers purchase an agile transformation that is offered with a framework. The framework is implemented, quote unquote, rolled out, and I don't think that is going to work in the long term. It could be that the situation was so bad that anything was going to work, that indeed a framework copied or a blueprint copied from other organization is better than what they had. Awesome. Then do it. But that probably is not the best situation to be in. You could use that as the starting point then for the next change, which will have to be your own, and breaking down the framework into smaller patterns and come up with your own blueprint, your own framework, your own method that fits your organization. So I think that's the number one um, trap, that a framework is implemented and managers think, okay, that's that. We are now agile. That's not going to work.
Thank you, thank you. I'm with you. So I have seen the same, and the moment I see that a particular company is too strict on a given framework, be it safe, be it less, or anything else,
Mm.
it's going to be a disaster, because without properly analyzing what the business requirements, they are trying to implement that blueprint as prescribed, right? So this is
Mhm.
asking for troubles.
Right.
Now,
And to be honest, I know plenty of coaches and consultants who use the frameworks in a good way. I mean,
hmm,
they see them simply as toolboxes capturing good ideas, and they are more mindful about which patterns to adopt and which ones to ignore. So they actually leave the blueprint behind and go to a smaller level of granularity, as we say, and that makes total sense. Those are the smart coaches and consultants who use the frameworks and other blueprints as suggestions to steal and tweak from,
hmm.
and then they are very valuable in term as libraries of common sense ideas.
Totally with you. Totally with you. And personally, Jürgen, in my uh, journey, right, the moment I started learning agile and kind of helping teams and organizations to adopt these practices and the mindset, starting with the mindset, right? What I've been doing is I've been using certain things from different frameworks, different concepts. Like example, as you rightly mentioned, I'm a big fan of lean mindset, right? There are a lot of useful ideas there, things like value stream, things like optimizing the value delivery, right? Paying more attention on the fat, right, which is the waste, etc., right? And then also other things like, even if you look at the manifesto, right, there are a lot of useful ideas. So the problem that you highlighted is correct, because if we try to pick one framework, try to apply as it is prescribed, then that's going to be the problem, right? But without doing that, if you kind of pick up, okay, these are the useful ideas, these are the things that will work for the given problem, right? That is what is probably the right thing. Let's move on to the next trap, right? So we spoke about the number one trap that you have seen, right? So blueprints are being taken as, the only way to implement a change, the only way to change a company is the number one problem. What's your next pick? What is the next trap that you have seen in the agile transformations?
Hmm. Well, not sure if it is the second one, but I do notice that a certain kind of question comes up repeatedly, even today at the conference where I am now, which is one form or another of how can I make someone else do what I want? I
Mhm.
have that question, I get that question repeatedly because this is about change management, how to be a change agent. How can I change organizations around me? I have some good ideas, but the employees are not doing what I want as a consultant. Or another question was, okay, we have an experienced crew that knows all about customer data, customer behavior. They look at the analytics and everything, but how can they tell the agile teams what to do? Like the
Mhm.
same question, but from a different angle. And I thought, uh, people keep asking me, how do I make someone else do my bidding? Basically. And it doesn't work like that. You cannot
Mhm.
make someone else do what you want. That is not the agile way. You need to figure out how to be an influencer, how to inspire people with your idea. And a lovely example of that is that I have a case study on Pipedrive, which is a super interesting company in Tallinn, Estonia, where they use a lot of the unfixed patterns. Actually, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, what you described is suspiciously similar to what we have already been doing for several years. Can we talk?" And so I had lovely conversations with people there, and they showed me, or they told me something that was super interesting. The product managers there come with proposals to the engineers of new feature sets that they want to have built, but they cannot tell them. They need to convince them, because the engineers volunteer to sign. They sign up to the feature sets, the new additions to the platform that they are most interested in. And they say it's a bit harder for the product managers because they cannot just tell the engineers what to do. They have
Mhm.
to be influencers. They have to pitch their suggestions. And it sounded totally fair to me, because it is easier to get product managers than software engineers, at least
Mhm.
in Estonia, because it's a small market and they have a couple of unicorn sized startups and scale
Right.
ups
Right.
there. So of course they have to promise the engineers that they have a great job, and that they can do what they want, and they volunteer for features. So I thought that was a great example of a company rethinking how we do things, and you cannot tell other people what to do. You have to be an influencer. You have to understand, what would an engineer find interesting about this
Mhm.
new feature set? What would be challenging for them? What would be fun for them? Make them care. So I recently created a new keynote, which is about change management. And the last slide literally says, why should they care? That is the question that you need to answer for yourself. If you want to be a successful change manager, change agent, you have an idea and you want other people to pick it up, you have to learn how to make them care about the idea.
Mhm.
If you do not understand what motivates them, if you cannot empathize with their teams that are doing the work, when the experienced crew knows all about customers data and customer behaviors, but they do not understand how to make the agile teams care, then they lost. They're not influencers. And I think that is the great challenge for anyone who is trying to transform organizations. Too often I get the question, how can I make other people do what I want? We need to get rid of that. The question should be, how can I learn uh, to make other people volunteer to do my work that I think is interesting, but how can I make them care? That's a different way of thinking.
Excellent perspective, Jurgen. Yeah, so I'm totally with you, because even sometime back, when I wanted to kind of understand how uh, the personal branding works, right? I explored into that topic, and then it ended up at what exactly you said, right? So I came up with a formula looking at various sources, right? So formula sounds like, right, branding equals credibility, credibility equals access equal power, right? So that
Mhm.
allows you to address people is a power, right? Power equals influence, right? It doesn't matter, like that's the same way we both are connected, right? And it's a matter of influencing each other, that this is a win-win, right? This there's a reason why we should be talking here, right?
Yep.
So it's the same way the teams work, right? As a manager, as a product manager, owner, even a scrum master, right? If I'm unable to influence the people around me, right, to
Yep.
do something that I feel what is right, I'm failing, right? So I think
Mhm.
if I'm successful, that's exactly what I'm doing, right? So thank you for that
Exactly.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
And
can,
I am the author of a couple of books. I cannot tell anyone to read my books. If only it was that easy. But no, it is not.
it's
The
not.
only thing I can do is try and make people care. Try and have them be interested in the topic, and indeed gain the credibility so that people trust my writing and my contributions. That's the best I can do. And within organizations, it needs to be the same thing. You should not tell people what to do, but make them care.
Absolutely. And let them decide what to do, right? You just facilitate the discussion, and maybe you can put bit of critical questions, so that they start thinking deeper and critically, so that they themselves understand what to do. The last question, you can make it short, but
All right.
I feel like this is a very important question. uh, Now, although we talk about these innovations, and new ways of managing, new ways of being agile, right? They look fantastic, and in fact, currently, I mean, not currently, like for the last 2.5 years, I started adopting EOS in the company that I work for, and it works greatly, right? Uh, the question is this: for those who are following a blueprint of a given framework, be it safe, be it Spotify, be it less, or anything else, right? Can you just tell your top two recommendations? How can they become productive as consultants and agile coaches? Any adjustments to just think of the top two recommendations that you can think of for them?
Well, I often summarize it as try things that are cheap, safe, and fast.
Right.
I have pulled away from statements such as celebrate failure and fail fast, and create an environment that is safe to fail, and so on, because the word fail is still in there.
Mhm.
And lots of people don't like the word fail. They don't like the idea of failing. I say nowadays, stop using the word fail, just try stuff. And you need to make sure that everything you try is cheap, that it is safe, and that it is fast. And then you learn so much in terms of management practices, agile practices, product design, and delivery, and so on. And failure for me is when you ran an experiment that was not cheap. You wasted far too much money. You could have
Mhm.
learned it in a much cheaper way. Then you failed. Even if you
Mhm.
learned something, if you wasted tens of thousands of euros and it could have been a few
Zero.
hundreds, you failed in the way you did your experiment. When
Correct.
people fail when it was unsafe. I have done things that were not safe, and I literally have wounds on my knees for running in the dark without a headlight, for example. That was not a safe experiment. I risked my health there. And then when it is not fast, I have done things that took 2 years to make, and only then I got feedback from customers, and it turned out that they were not interested in what I was making. That was a feedback cycle that took far too long. Of course, I learned from this. I learned a lot, but that's not an excuse. I could have learned it much faster. So I still failed despite the learning. So my advice now is usually try crazy shit, and make it cheap and safe and fast. So that's three
Right.
things, not two, but that summarizes what I do nowadays, and what I suggest other people do, whether there is organizational structure or process or anything that you do. Experiment the hell out of whatever you're doing, but keep it cheap, safe, and fast.
Excellent perspective, Yuga. Thank you. Thank you. Learn so much from
Thank you
your
so much.
from your great tips and suggestions. So with that, I'm not going to take any further time from your schedule, knowing that it's going to be a busy night for you.
Dinner
Uh,
time.
yeah. So thank you very much for first place accepting my invite to join with me on this particular podcast, and then after joining, sharing some great perspectives from your end. I'm sure what you shared with us uh, are great pointers for all of us to go back to our process and start thinking, hey, what kind of things that I can start thinking and adapting, or do I have to change? Thank you very much for that. With that, I'm
Thank you for the
gonna
invite.
wrap up the session. Looking forward to working further with you. I'll be in touch. Yeah, so until we see each other
Thanks.
again, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Good luck with the
Keep up the
podcast. Thanks for the
great work.
invite. All right. Thanks. Bye bye.
This is the Agile Wisdom Podcast.